Zulia Diakundula, VOA.
U.S. President Donald Trump cut short his second North Korea summit after a dispute over sanctions. We'll have a live report. The glitter of Zimbabwe gold fails to brighten the economy. And in our health report, raising awareness about rare diseases and their impact on patients' lives. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Donald Trump has cut short his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The reason, according to the president, was that Kim asked for too much. As viewers Bill Gallo reports from Hanoi, the big question is, where do the nuclear negotiations go from here?
Donald Trump portrays himself as a deal maker, but in Hanoi with Kim Jong-un, he couldn't reach a deal.
I could have signed an agreement today, and then you people would have said, oh, what a terrible deal, what a terrible thing he did. No, you have to be prepared to walk.
Trump had been lowering expectations for days, saying there is no rush to reach a deal. Turns out he was right. Kim demanded all sanctions be relieved at once, according to Trump. The U.S. was unwilling to do that. Trump says the papers were ready to sign. A signing ceremony was even added to the White House schedule. But then the White House released a statement saying no deal. Not even a joint statement was released, and no framework for moving the talks forward. But some analysts are glad Trump walked away.
North Korea made an untenable ask. They said, we want to partially denuclearize in exchange for a full removal of sanctions.
There are no plans for a third summit, but Trump insists there was no ill will when he walked away.
I think it was very good, very friendly. This wasn't a walk away like you get up and walk out. No, this was very friendly. We shook hands.
Heading into the summit, U.S. officials had hoped to at least agree on what denuclearization means and how to start moving that process forward. 8 months after the first summit, it's not clear they're any closer to that goal.
Well, for more on the U.S.-North Korea summit in Vietnam, viewers Bill Gallo now joins me live from Hanoi. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening.
Now, as you just mentioned, the president went in with very low expectations, and as it turns out, the North Korean leader was not willing to yield. What did the White House expect to achieve going in?
Well, ahead of this summit, U.S. officials had been quite blunt that they had not even reached an agreement about what denuclearization means. It's not clear whether this summit made any progress on that front, but obviously things did not go well today. The summit was not only cut short, there was no joint statement, there was no end to the Korean War, which they were expected to announce. So this is a pretty negative outcome, I think, from most standpoints.
From what I understood, the last summit in Singapore did not even reach a point of defining clearly what denuclearization means. So, in few words, what was really the purpose of this meeting?
It's a really good question. Well, you can say that the relations have improved to some degree, although it might even be hard to move forward based on this summit. If there is a perception that this failed, there will be much more criticism of future meetings. Donald Trump, in fact, said there is no plans for a future summit. However, he said he would like to see lower-level talks continue. So if this could happen, if these lower-level talks happen, that could be a success.
So the lower-level talks are intended to achieve, for example, convincing North Korea to completely denuclearize, or at least to redefine what that means?
Well, I think you might have to start at what, the definition is. That's true. But then at least if they can move this process forward with lower level talks, that would be a start.
Well, now you're about to, you're done with covering this as a journalist. How do you, coming out of this, what do you feel really happened in Hanoi?
Well, the funny thing is, there were a lot of things expected to happen that didn't happen. So when you're a journalist, you kind of prepare for all these scenarios, and you've had a lot of things written. Well, it turned out a lot different than everyone thought, so we'll have to save those stories for later.
Good job, though, Bill. Thank you very much for joining us from Hanoi.
Thank you.
Well, that's viewers Bill Gallo reporting live from Hanoi in Vietnam. Now, 4 days after Senegal's presidential election, incumbent Macky Sall has been named the winner, with 58% of votes cast, according to provisional results announced Thursday by the official counting body. The majority win hands President Sall a second term without a runoff vote. Opposition candidate Idrissa Seck finished second with 21% of votes, while Ousmane Sonko placed third with 16%. Sall, whom rights groups have criticized for squeezing out rivals, was expected to win after a modernizing first term that propelled Senegal's economic growth. Since Sunday's vote, opposition candidates have rejected reports of an outright victory for Sall, saying their tallies point to a second round of voting. Seck and Sonko have not yet commented on the National Vote Counting Commission's results, which are preliminary until validated by the Constitutional Council. The candidates have 72 hours to register an appeal. Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission presented the certificate of return to President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday. Buhari was re-elected by defeating his main opponent, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. In a ceremony held at Abuja International Conference Center, President Buhari delivered a short speech pledging to further guarantee security, revitalize the economy, and crack down on corruption. He said that people will witness the country stepping into a new stage of development. The African Union has commended Nigeria on its peaceful election despite sporadic election-related violence that killed over 40 people. The AU Commission's deputy chairperson, Kwesi Kwate, called for lasting peace after the polls and urged winners to embrace inclusiveness. The fourth annual Aid and International Development Forum, Africa Summit, ended Wednesday in Nairobi, Kenya. This year's summit focused on improving aid delivery and development strategy in sub-Saharan East Africa. The AIDF Summit was launched in 2015 to engage all the relevant aid and international development stakeholders within Africa and beyond. The two-day conference attracts 350 senior attendees from regional governments, United Nations agencies, international and regional non-governmental organizations, investors and donors, research institutes, and the private sector. The summit advocates for a cross-sector approach through inclusive, effective collaboration and coordination between national and international organizations.
So our aim with AIDF is to bring people together to talk more. We believe that, and as most of the speakers have been saying, there is a gap in coordination, communication. There's also been a lot of discussion around gender, around engagement of the youth. And these are things that need to be discussed over and over again to make sure that they're being brought into practice. And then when they're brought into practice, to make sure that it's being done correctly or to make tweaks, because we can always be improving. And that's what we're trying to do at AIDF.
I really think that the digitalization is important, and it's very critical for us to meet the goals that all the bodies and the governments are setting. So without digitalization, and now we are positioned very well in this era where we have devices that are able to help us to utilize the concept of digitalization. So I think it's quite useful, and it's good that this concept of digitalization is being accepted, and more people are looking into it.
Well, the summit included presentation of the Innovator of the Year award. Well, Zimbabwe might have surpassed its 2018 gold production target, but its glitter has not brightened Zimbabwe's poor economy. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
In this mineral-rich area, some people have abandoned farming for gold. Kudzanai Zumuya says he could not find a job, so 6 years ago he started mining in the Bindura area, about 100 kilometers north of Harare. But his situation hasn't improved, he says.
Yes, gold is a good source of income, but there are some risks involved. You can be trapped underground. But there is nothing we can do given the harsh economic environment we're in. But others have managed to buy cattle, others built nice houses through gold, so I am hopeful.
On this day, Zhomuya had less than a gram of gold to show for his work. A buyer waiting in his office purchased what little gold he had for a price they did not reveal. The precious metal is one of the resources Zimbabwe is depending on to drive its economic recovery. Last year, Zimbabwe's gold production was at 33 tons, surpassing its target by 3 tons. Despite that, small-scale miners aren't seeing much benefit, and Zimbabwe has little to show for its gold output. Analysts point to corruption, mismanagement, and poor policies as the reasons for Zimbabwe's failure to benefit from its vast gold reserves and mineral wealth.
I can't really say we are failing to derive value from gold as a nation, because gold is already valuable as a mineral. But what I can say is that the state is failing to support certain institutions that are involved in the gold extraction sector. For instance, the artisanal and small-scale miners.
The Minerals Watchdog says the issue of property rights has to be addressed to help miners like Zhomuya. President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government insists it values small-scale miners.
We have the Zimbabwe Miners Federation, and the Zimbabwe Miners Federation is the entity which government is working with to coordinate the activities of the small-scale mining sector. In terms of the statistics, we did 33 tons, of which over 50 of gold, of which over 50% came from the artisanal mining sector.
Still, miners say their lot hasn't improved as the nation with vast mineral wealth continues to be marred in an economic crisis. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We are also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Macquarie. Still ahead on Africa 54, raising awareness of rare diseases. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines. Take it over.
In Algeria, police arrest journalists at a rally against alleged censorship of news coverage of protests against a possible fifth term for veteran President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. In Sierra Leone, British primatologist Jane Goodall visited the country's Takugama chimpanzee sanctuary on Wednesday and received the so-called Order of the Rockall, the highest honorific title in Sierra Leone, from the nation's president. In Zimbabwe, President Emmerson Mnangagwa and his counterpart, Botswana President Mokgweetsi Masisi, signed mutual cooperation agreements in Harare. Finally, Liberian President George Weah meets with Israeli President in Jerusalem and stresses that his country is ready for business with Israel.
Well, it's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with new information on rare diseases. Lino.
That's right, Vincent. Wolfram syndrome, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, leprosy. Well, what do they have in common? They are all classified as rare diseases. Each year, on the last day of February, the world commemorates a Rare Disease Day to raise awareness about the group of conditions and their impact on patients. Experts say a rare disease is any disease that affects a small percentage of the population. Most rare diseases are genetic and are present throughout a person's entire life, even if symptoms do not immediately appear. Well, get this. There are 7,000 types of rare diseases, approximately, and 350 million people suffer from a rare disease globally, and 5% of rare conditions are treatable. For more on rare diseases, I am joined live via Skype by Kelly Du Plessis. She is Managing Director of RareX and CEO and founder of Rare Diseases South Africa. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And joining us in the studio is Chika Dunyo, Director of Education Programs with the U.S. National Organization for Rare Disorder. Chika, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for recognizing Rare Disease Day.
Absolutely. And I will start with something that may seem superficial for some people, but it's actually very significant, which is your wardrobe, particularly your scarf. It's a zebra scarf, and there is a link to Rare Disease Day.
Sure, yes. So I work at the National Organization for Rare Disorders.
Yes.
And today we are pushing our Show Your Stripes campaign. Many people in the rare disease community know, you may not know, many people may not know that physicians are often educated to assume when they see a patient in an exam room that that patient has a common disease. Mm-hmm. There's a saying that they're taught, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras.
Okay.
And so we want to push that it could be a zebra. Mm-hmm. And so Show Your Stripes and me wearing my stripes today is to really commemorate the campaign and to raise awareness for the community that we are here, the rare disease community is here, and we're here in great numbers.
Absolutely. And Kelly, let me come to you. What is the incidence of rare diseases in South Africa? Is it even, are you even able to tell how many people are affected?
Sadly, we are not. We have really, really poor data coming out of our country at the moment, and that is one of the biggest challenges that we have, is lobbying to government to understand that rare diseases are in fact a public health priority when we have such limited data. Based on international prevalence, we should expect to have about 3.6 million South Africans impacted, given our population size of 56 million. But in actual fact, we do not have a rare disease registry to actually prove those statistics.
Wow. You know, Chika, I would like your reaction to that. No rare disease registry in South Africa and in Africa as a whole. As I was doing the research.
Sure.
What is being done in the United States that perhaps can be a lesson learned for other countries to replicate?
Sure. You know, really understanding the size of the population is even difficult here in the United States. Some of the numbers that we've given are estimations, mm-hmm. And without having a countrywide registry, it's difficult. I think some of the lessons that, you know, I can impart to other countries, including my homeland, Africa, I'm a Ghanaian, is that, you know, really working with institutions, research institutions that have a good infrastructure in place to implement and institute registries. We're seeing a lot of that across the United States. NORD has its own registry platform as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of the rare disease communities come to NORD to see, you know, how many people in the population in that community are afflicted with this particular rare disease. What do their symptoms look like? What does their day-to-day look like? Mm-hmm. Hopefully that information, that data that's collected may lead to future research that may lead to therapies.
Okay, and Kelly, talk to us about what you are doing right now through your organization to help those that you are able to identify.
So we have really started with patient advocacy and activism in terms of government controls to make sure that government recognizes us. We are obviously in a period of change with NHI being looked at to be brought into our country. And with that, lobbying for inclusions of rare diseases as part of universal health care has become such a critical issue. But we also have a very divided healthcare system in the sense that we have a certain percentage of the population receiving healthcare through private sector. So it's very, very difficult because you're almost having to do the work twice on both sides to make sure that it's aligned and that there is equitable healthcare.
And Chika, you got involved actually in the rare disease advocacy and work because you were affected through your sister. You saw a journey, you experienced a journey with your sister's diagnosis. Even though it was very long and difficult and complex, we can definitely understand that. Could you perhaps summarize a little bit with regards to how that journey was like?
Sure. You know, my sister was a vibrant 21-year-old. She was a typical 21-year-old. She was going to school. She, you know, went out, had fun, but she started suffering from symptoms that were very odd for someone her age. She went to multiple doctors. She received a variety of different diagnoses and was given treatments and therapies that didn't lead to improved health. And so by the time she was diagnosed, she was very sick at that point. Unfortunately, about a year and a half later, she lost her life due to complications of relapsing polychondritis.
And that experience was here. She was living here.
Yes, she was living in the U.S. And so, you know, a lot of people here in the U.S. really struggle with getting early diagnoses, with getting treatments to treat their rare disease, because about 90% of rare disease communities don't have an approved FDA treatment. And so you can imagine that the journey to diagnosis and treatment is even that much more difficult in countries back home in Africa.
I'm sorry about your sister's experience. That's very, very sorry. And Kelly, let me come to you and ask you, what would you like to see in the future? I mean, there's so many things that really need focus and time and resources, but very quickly, what would you like to see?
I would definitely like to see an improvement in the resources in terms of diagnostics to make sure that patients receive appropriate diagnoses early on and at appropriate times, and then obviously improved access. We want to make sure that no patient's left behind and everybody who has been diagnosed receives the treatment that they truly deserve.
Okay, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. That's all the time we have. We have to leave it there.
Thank you so much.
Chika, I appreciate your time. Thanks
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you so much.
And that was Kelly du Plessis, she is CEO and founder of Rare Diseases of Africa, and Chika Dunyo, Director of Education Programs with the National Organization for Rare Disorders. And Vincent, that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
I'm right here. Thanks a lot, Lenore. Now be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports. That's every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, numerous media organizations working in Venezuela are denouncing authorities for harassing, bullying, and even confiscating the equipment of journalists as they cover the ongoing crisis in that South American country. While embattled President Nicolas Maduro assures that press freedom is respected in Venezuela, journalist groups tell another story. Here's VOA's Christina Caicedo-Smith.
The Inter-American Press Association and other press freedom groups have denounced Venezuelan police for using force, intimidation, and repression against journalists while they were covering recent demonstrations at the Colombia-Venezuela border.
We saw acts of violence and aggression towards journalists, confiscation of equipment and recorded material during the delivery of humanitarian help. We also saw how journalists were held for hours, the shutdown of digital portals, and physical aggression towards journalists.
The Committee to Protect Journalists also released an advisory warning international and local journalists of potential physical harm, as well as detention and prosecution by authorities. Both organizations say the attacks against journalists and attempts at censorship took place when trucks with U.S. humanitarian aid were trying to enter Venezuela. The aid was requested by opposition leader Juan Guaidó, who has been recognized as Venezuela's interim president by the U.S. and a host of other nations.
That is a perfect example of all forms of repression to freedom of press. Most importantly is that international media witnessed the Venezuelan reality and that the journalistic labor is protected because Venezuelan citizens have the right to know what is going on.
Jorge Ramos, lead anchor of Univision, said he and his television crew were detained at the presidential residence and their equipment confiscated after Maduro abruptly cut off their interview.
The interview ended after 15 minutes. I asked him about the lack of democracy in Venezuela, about the reports of abuse, torture, and political prisoners. And when I show him the video on my iPad of some kids looking for food in a trash truck, then he stopped the interview.
Ramos and his crew were later released and expelled from the country. Jorge Rodriguez, a top Venezuelan communications official, posted a tweet that hundreds of journalists had done interviews at the Miraflores presidential palace and had fulfilled their journalistic work. A Freedom House report describes Venezuela as a country where there is no freedom of the press. Cristina Caicedo-Smith, VOA News, Washington.
To East Africa now, Uganda's tourism minister sparked outrage earlier this month after announcing a beauty pageant for curvy women to promote tourism. Activists are calling for the pageant to be called off. Sisipo Sikwayiya has the details.
If you say Munankole woman, the way those curves, they have a story. When you say Muganda woman concentrating on the West, the way she does, there is a story about that, and that's the story we sell. That's the tourism.
It's these words that have landed Uganda's tourism minister in hot water with activists. Godfrey Kiwanda sparked outrage earlier this month after announcing a beauty contest for curvy women as a means to promote tourism.
We consider this as something that is dehumanizing, degrading, and despicable for women, because women are not cultural artifacts that can act as tourism products.
Activists say the show objectifies women and promotes sex tourism. They are worried the pageant will encourage the commercial sexual exploitation of women and girls and encourage more to be trafficked overseas for sex. More than 1,000 people have signed an online petition calling on the tourism ministry to cancel the pageant. But not everyone is against the contest. Some Ugandans say it will help challenge the stereotype that only slim women are beautiful. And this contestant says it's a celebration of plus-size women.
When this pageant came up, the Miss Curvy, I felt appreciated, because at one point I would tell someone, I'm not fat anymore, I'm curvy.
Tourism is a major foreign exchange earner for Uganda, with hundreds of thousands of people visiting annually. But most people come to see the diverse wildlife. And critics of the Miss Curvy show say promoting women in a similar context is unacceptable.
Well, that was Sisipo Sikwayiya with that report. Welcome back to Africa 54, and now here's what's trending. Between being a 7th grader, speaking at events, and running a foundation, Stacey Fro is getting attention as a budding writer in South Africa. Stacey is one of the country's youngest authors, having published 3 titles that include picture books for children. She is currently working on 2 new books, which will be published later this year. Fro says her love for writing was inspired by children's books that she started reading from an early age. Fro wrote her first book, Smelly Cats, a book about 2 feline cousins, in 2015, and finished it before her parents realized what she was doing. The young author has gone on to win various accolades. That's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.